Good morning. Welcome back into the conference room. We are going to now begin a panel in which we are fortunate enough to have 4 ministers of the government of Ukraine. I'll introduce them in a second. I think I'll probably be the only one speaking in English, so be prepared for Ukrainian. And I will ask each of them some questions. In no particular order, at the far end, we have Volodymyr Borodyansky. And besides sharing a first name with the president, he is also the Minister of Culture, Youth, and Sports of Ukraine. I think to be the Minister of Youth in Ukraine means you're in charge of the government. Next to him, we have Timothy Miloyanov. I apologize. What? Milovanov. I apologize. Ukrainian is not my first language. And he is the minister of a lot of things. The economy, trade, and agriculture. So, sir, welcome. After him, to his right, Mikhailo Fedorov, who's the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of the Digital Transformation. And to his right and to my left is, how many women are there in the cabinet? 4? 4. So 25% of the women in the government. Hannah Novosad. Oh, 20%, excuse me. I'll do my math. Who is the Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine. So again, I want to congratulate all of them. I want to welcome all of them. The subject is government for happiness. I'll be honest, I've worked for 4 presidents in the United States. I've worked for Mr. Carter, Mr. Reagan, and both Presidents Bush. The whole concept of government for happiness eludes me. I had many experiences in those years. Happiness was not the principal one. I'm sure it's just one of the many differences between the United States and Ukraine. But I'm going to begin with Minister Novosad, with Hannah, because I want to begin where Tony Blair ended. And Tony Blair sat here, for those of you who were in the previous session, and the former Prime Minister was making the argument that over the next decade, the principal challenge politically in the world would be to adapt to the new technologies. And a lot of these are obviously not just information, but artificial intelligence, robotics, and the autonomous vehicles. There'll be all sorts of new technologies in the medical and genetic space. And what will happen in all of our societies is a significant number of jobs, literally tens and tens of millions of jobs around the world are going to disappear. And at the same time, tens and tens of millions of jobs will come into being. But, and it's a big but, there will be a gap in skills. There'll be a gap in the educational requirements between the jobs that are disappearing and the jobs that are coming into existence. And that will be one of the principal challenges for all of our societies, because if we don't narrow that gap, if we don't find ways to what we call reskill our workers, we will have prolonged unemployment. And for any society, prolonged unemployment at high levels is a major threat to social cohesion and social stability. So my question for the Minister of Education is, to what extent is this on her radar screen? Is this on your radar screen? To what extent is this something you are concerned with? And what is your thinking? What is your planning for dealing with this challenge in Ukraine?
Thank you very much, Richard. Good morning, everyone. You mentioned Tony Blair, who maybe like 20 years ago famously said that his 3 priorities are education, education, education. Today morning, our Prime Minister said education only once, so there is something to talk with him about. But at least he mentioned education as a priority. For the sake of the panel, I'll switch to Ukrainian so that more Ukrainians understand me, those who are watching online.
Yesterday, Steven Pinker said that any government that wants to work for well-being and happiness of their citizens want to prioritize the spheres where they will be attaining their goals. And I think I've been lucky in this, because you could not but prioritize education. Education fills the lives of every one of us and every citizen's life, and from 5 to 20 years it is responsible for the lion's share of our lives. When we want happiness for us and our citizens, we have to understand what do we input into this system of formal education. What are the convictions and ideas and sometimes even stereotypes that people get upon leaving the school? If we have a look at the most successful world's countries, and according to Peace survey, we see the China, Hong Kong, which is rated separately, Japan, Southern Korea, Singapore, who have the best indicators in mathematics, physics, natural sciences. But when we look at the list of the World Happiness Report, we see there Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and maybe the researchers and analysts will argue whether there's a correlation there, but I think that the system of education has a direct impact on whether people feel themselves happy. So let's have a look why those countries are the happiest. The Scandinavian countries are putting extremely high percentage of sub-skills into their education system. Kids in these countries get a notion about how they work with other people and how they work with their own interests. And this is about community and its impact on lives. And when we build our system of education, we have to adopt the best practices from abroad. The discussion in the Ukrainian society about what the school and the graduate should be has just begun in the Ukrainian society. We probably need more engineers or maybe more people engaged in humanities. We have to discuss this, but I do know that only those people will be happy who can be creative and open and who are able of making their own choice. What are our plans, Richard asked. I think that if we do not start with the system of school education, and if we don't concentrate on those 2 most important things to make kids open and creative, and those who make their own choices, we won't attain any success. What's our school now? I think that many people here have kids in private schools, and you don't see this, but the Ukrainian school now is the school that inherited all the negative from the Soviet system, the school built on fear, which permits all the relations between pupils and teachers and parents and ministry and directors. And if we do not remove the fear, then we cannot really talk about happy and successful citizens. The second thing that we need to do is to give kids an opportunity to be subjects. We very rarely ask about the feedback from the students. We very rarely give them the opportunity to choose the subjects that they learn. If we do not start to do this, we won't have conscientious citizens able of making their own choices in life. Our government treats all this in a very civilized way. Everything that was there before us, and I worked in the Ministry of Education with the former team, we have to continue this. I'm talking about the new Ukrainian school and the reform of school education, which has already laid down the current underground for making our school more modern. But we have to make these changes irreversible, and not only in the first level of school, but also develop it to the basic school and the senior school, and provide the possibility for moving forward in a successful way. Thank you.
It was not too long, but I'm going to come back to you later. Let me turn to the Deputy Prime Minister, who has, I assume as Deputy Prime Minister, you've got a general set of responsibilities, but you've also got the particular digital portfolio. So what does happiness mean in that context? In this society, what is it you're trying to accomplish that you believe would add to a level of social or collective happiness?
Thank you for your question, everybody. Hello. First of all, I would say what is happiness for me and for our team, because this is very important. I think that only a happy person may make other people happy. For the first time, I understood what is unhappiness professionally when I was a student. I became a student's mayor. I wanted to help entrepreneurs, start-uppers. I was introduced in different educational programs, but I got my scholarship. I received scholarship and then also moonlighted in order to survive. And I saw a slogan which said, "I'm scared by a naked person who offers me a shirt." And I think that this quote has changed my life. I've been working day and night for 6 years, and my company became one of the leaders in this sphere. Our last case was that we worked as part of the Zelensky team, and we worked to change the political campaign. When the campaign finished, when I was looking at my workers, and when Mr. Zelensky became the president, I felt professional happiness for the first time in my life. If we are talking about happiness within our profession, it is when you have very clear-cut goals and the energy to attain these goals, when you have support of your team, of your wife, of your friends, and you get the result that you can actually touch. This is happiness. When I look at the government, I see the team of happiness, because everyone has achieved something in their professional activity. No one was there because of some political agreements. These are people who already feel themselves happy, feel happy, and we have already set up very high-placed goals in order to again get this hormone of happiness. How can we help our people become happier? I want our state become a simple service as Uber or Booking, a service that people usually do not even notice. If you want the help from the state, you just get out your smartphone and get whatever you need to be done. Today, when our people have to deal with the state, they are unhappy. But my goal is that happy people in the happy government help our people make our state a service which makes every person happy. If you translate this into a specific KPI, then we say that a happy manager is a manager who has clear-cut goals. Then we want within the nearest 3 years to make the 50 most popular services available online, and that 50% of our target audience feel 90% satisfaction. This is our happy managers KPI. So we are in for some digital transformation. We have made a huge step forward. For the first time in the history of Ukraine, we have a ministry which is engaged with digital transformation. There's a body which formulates and shapes the policy. In this direction, we have a fully fledged committee in the parliament who look into this, not IT, not innovations, because this is the responsibility of entrepreneurs, but the committee which is engaged with transformation. We have a status of vice premier, which allows to coordinate the transformation sphere in every ministry, because the organizational structure is very important, and we also have the political will. They still mention this notion. There's a political will of our president and the clear-cut vision of what we want to achieve in the nearest years. So we have everything to make our people happy. However, only non-competence, low competence and internal strife can be in our way, but we don't have this, and I think that in the nearest 5 years we will live as one single and friendly, happy family. I want to address Ukrainians. We won't be able to make you happy if you don't want to be happy. Please set up ambitious goals for yourself, find resources to realize them, socialize, and communicate with people who have already achieved something in this life. If you look at every of our ministers, you know, most of them are people from provinces who do not have rich parents and who are basically self-made people. So let's join our hands to attain incredible.
Wanted to turn next to Minister Milovanov, and one of his 3 accounts is agriculture. And one of the themes of yesterday and this morning is the centrality of land reform and land privatization to the future of the economy here. That in some ways you can't separate, to use the theme of this panel, the potential happiness of this society, the success of this society, and the success of land reform. So I was hoping you would address that.
Thank you. I'll get to the land reform in a second, but I want to address the question of happiness. What is happiness for me? It's ironic I'm sitting on this panel because yesterday my mother-in-law, or my mother, passed away over this night. And then I look to the left of me, and you look to the right of you, and you see the faces, and you ask the question, what is happiness for these people? My engagement with Ukraine started in the winter of 2014, where I, being a tenured faculty at a US university, came home after teaching advanced microeconomics, switched on YouTube, and watched in real time how people are being killed in Ukraine. That should not happen. This is why I am where I am, because this should not ever happen again. Now, if we talk about happiness, well, I think, we can dissect from the economic perspective into a number of simple things. Financial security. I want to make sure, myself, that when I retire, I have enough money that I do not need to rely on people around me, or, I'll be okay, I worry about health care. I worry about, an emergency service is coming on time. I worry about my kids getting proper education, that that they are competitive in the modern world. So there are basic things. And then if we go to the growth of the economy today, And I'm coming now back to agriculture. We see that there are industries like agriculture which are growing double digits, or there are industries like IT in which productivity of labor is growing regardless of 2014 hit on the economy. It's been growing steadily. So in fact, there are two Ukraines. There are two countries in this country. One is you and us together. We benefit from innovation. We benefit from technological progress. There has been no place for me 10 years or 15 years ago in this country. But today, there is. My salary is increasing. I can earn today the US salary. But in 1999, I had to immigrate. So there is that improvement. And yet, there are people who are being left behind. As we move jobs into IT, as we move jobs into high tech, there are people without skills who are actually losing jobs. That's a just humane issue, that's an economic issue, it's a political economic issue, because these are the voters, that's where the populism is coming from. We have to take those people along. That's why part of my portfolio is actually labor market reform, with professionalization. We're going to work together with the, and already we have some changes in the way we're going to invest limited state support. We're a poor country. We don't have that much money. We can afford to spend it on, wishes of different vested interests. We have to target it, and it's in our common interest that we bring that part of Ukraine together with us. Otherwise, Ukraine is not sustainable. Now, that's why an important part of agriculture, of land reform, is to ensure equal access. There will be financial support to small and medium farmers and just individuals. We're going to retarget that support that we're giving to agriculture today, all of it, to even out the rules of the game for those small companies or individuals who want to be a player, who want to have a fair chance to become a large agri-holding company in 10 years or 20 years from now. And so that's an important part of the reform, ensuring that people who do not have access to capital or who face barriers because financial markets are imperfect, those people have the same rights or the same ability to participate in the market. But after that, whoever is willing to pay more will buy the land. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for being here, and I'm sorry for your loss. Let us go last to Minister Borodiansky, the Minister of Culture, Youth, and Sports. I'll be honest, I live in New York, and happiness and sports, there's no connection. The Knicks are the worst team in basketball. The Giants may be the worst team in football. The Yankees haven't won the World Series in more years than I can count. So I'm unfamiliar increasingly with the connection between happiness and sports. But I'm curious, what is the connection here?
Добрий день. Я почну з того, що не одна країна світу.
Good morning. I will start by saying that there is no country in the world that would have overcome the crisis without understanding the culture, spirituality, and national interest is the foundation of overcoming any crisis. We have these debates with Mr. Melovanov. What comes first? What is the basis and what is the structure? The economy and or how people think. I think we act out what we think, and economy does influence that as well. In terms of your question regarding sports, I will say that when we start going into sports, at first it's not you're not good at it, but then as time goes by you become better and better. We start playing better volleyball or tennis or football, and we begin to enjoy it, and that's part of the happiness. And I think that what we are doing, what our ministry is in charge of, is something that allows people to enjoy their lives. And I don't believe that you can make someone happy. I believe that you can create circumstances where the person would be able to be part of the happiness, because because being happy is a conscious decision. It's about work, about labor, and it's about asking yourself every day, have I changed today? And the state, Ministry of Economy as well, and other ministries have to create opportunities to do that. And finally, I would like to say the budget of our ministry is 12 billion hryvnia. But to answer a simple question, what societal benefit is provided by our ministry is something that I have not been able to answer. Thank you.
Let me ask one other question about happiness in sports. My favorite sport is one, again, that bears no relationship with happiness. It's called golf. And if there's anyone in this room who's a golfer, they'll understand exactly what I mean without any explanation. Is there a future for golf? Because there's a direct connection between tourism potential and golf potential in Ukraine.
You know, I will say that the task of our country and my task, let's just separate the sport into three. The physical training, the massive sport, and high achievement sport. Physical training, the potential audience, about 15 million people. Our task is to make sure that people would have physical training not less than 2 times a week. I can't give you precise figures, but that would reduce the expenditures of our country in treating diseases. Second is popular sports, the organized sport, so to speak. That's children's sport, 4 million people there. So it forms the personality, a child. It gives the understanding that fair victory, fair struggle is important, makes people stronger, it makes people more resilient, stress resistant, and there's there's also professional sport, and there's also minuscule of elite sport, which is golf. It's still very expensive. It's not organized sport, and I don't see any role of the government here. It's out of the scope of the government intervention. But if private sector thinks that it's attractive and they're ready to invest, they're welcome. We will provide all the opportunity to make it happen.
Yeah, the connection is between land reform and making some of the land available for golf courses, but I digress. Hannah, I want to turn back to you in the question of education. One of the reasons that some of us think the United States is having the divisions it has is we don't teach civics for the most part in our schools. We don't teach our own history very well. A lot of Americans are coming of age without understanding, without having necessarily read the Declaration of Independence, or they haven't read de Tocqueville. They haven't read the Federalist Papers. They don't understand the political DNA of their own country. What is it you're doing here or thinking of doing here so future generations of Ukrainians have a common understanding of their own history, their own past, and who they are?
I think, first of all, we have to start with having a common understanding in the wider society before going to school. I think that the revolution of 2013-14 and the war that they came afterwards, it changed the political identity and political consciousness of the society. I don't know, in many ways. And this is also something that has to be reflected in the curriculum of our schools, in the textbook of our schools, in the way the teachers teach. I can't say it's very simple. By this moment, it's been like 5 years since all these events, and we still have in many textbooks Russia as the friend of Ukraine. We still have mention about the, I don't know, how friendly we are with our enemy, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of work to do with regard to curriculum, with regard to textbooks, with regard to children are taught, and this is the long way, but I guess before we move to school, we have to have common understanding in the society how we explain this or that events.
But can you imagine the time will come when there would be a common curriculum, for example, in elementary school or high school or at the university level, in order to expose, not to have intellectual uniformity, but to make sure that everyone's been at least exposed to some of the same history and some of the same basics of your political process?
Sure, this is something that we have to do through the new educational standards that have to go through kindergarten, school, vet, higher education. This is something that we work on right now.
I want to turn back to the Deputy Prime Minister. One of the big debates going on in the world is 5G. And the question is the next generation of providing bandwidth for digital interaction. There's China is quite advanced. The United States is somewhat behind. Europe has certain potential options. Where does Ukraine see itself going in the area of 5G? I don't mean necessarily producing its own system, just to be clear, but whose system does it see itself participating in or becoming dependent on?
Thank you for your question. At the first meeting of the government, we agreed that we will call things by their names. So in order to speak 5G today, we have to fix a lot of things that are broken. Meanwhile, no one now in our country understands to what extent we do have the penetration of internet in our regions. And we want to fix that first in the next couple of months. And our goal for the nearest 3 years is to make sure that 100% of the social infrastructure and towns and settlements and cities would have access to broadband internet. We want to make it part of the law that there must be a minimum speed requirement for internet. And so far we are working on introducing a full-fledged 3G, 4G across the country because it's patches here and there, and we have a lot of black spots where we don't have 3G or 4G. But with mobile operators, we're going to present this plan. We already have the agreement how in 1 or 2 years we will make sure that in each spot of Ukraine would have good 3 or 4G, and unless we fix these basic things, we will not be able to switch to the new level. This is our approach in everything. We're not talking about innovations unless some unknown people have access to the registries we have. So we have a clear plan on how to fix basic things and then move to the next level. Of course, we are talking indeed to different companies regarding the implementing 5G. We are looking into different options, but to be realistic, in these 3 years we have to demonstrate it to the Ukrainians, to the companies, to the world, that we are progressing, that we are solving these issues here. If I'm taking the train to Zaporizhzhia and I have good 4G, then we'll talk with you about 5G next.
I used to work a lot with Jim Baker when he was Secretary of State, and in his Texas accent, he used to always remind us, you have to crawl before you walk, and you walk before you run. And what you've just laid out is the Ukrainian equivalent of that strategy in digital. I wanted to turn to Minister Milovanov again. One of your other hats is trade. And could you say a little bit about where you think this country will go? To what extent is, even not being in the EU, will Europe be your principal trading partner? Or, for example, before long, your president's going to be in Washington. To what extent the United States? What is your sense of a trading strategy for Ukraine?
Дякую дуже за запитання.
Thank you very much for this question. We do require allies in the international trades. The nearest biggest market for us is the EU. And I do hope that the scope or the growth of trade with EU will pick up and will grow. The association agreement with EU is also our priority. One of the most important areas that we're going to work on is industrial visa-free regime to resolve the issue of standardization, to make sure that our businesses would be more efficient in trading with the EU. But we are also open for the rest of the world, for all partners, including United States, but not only. I think and I hope that we'll be able to be integrated in the supply chain. Sorry, I don't know what's the Ukrainian for supply chain. In the nearest future, we do know that our companies that trade are more efficient from the point of view of labor productivity. That's why export-oriented sectors are important, because that is solving that second problem that I was talking about, is that we have this other Ukraine and that we need to increase labor productivity. That's why exports is a priority. Thank you.
Minister Borodiansky, say something about what does culture mean? What is your definition of happiness there? How will you know you've succeeded in that area in a couple of years? I'm curious, where does that take us?
It's not an easy question. Let me introduce the notion of cultural capital. Cultural capital is a set of traditions, behavior, social bondage. It's a broad understanding of how we interact with each other, how we think about ourselves, in the world, how we feel about our common interest. Can a Ukrainian student explain why he's proud of Ukraine? All of that together is a cultural capital. So if we work well, our citizens, our school children and adults will be able to explain Ukraine's place in the world. And they will be able to explain why they are proud of Ukraine. They will be able to explain what they feel being part of this country, and why do they believe in the future of their country. One of the challenges that we all face is that everything is very capsulated for us. If you look at our museums, these are museums that conserve. They are not communicated, they conserve things. If you look at mobility of our people, the more than 70% are not leaving the boundaries of their region, making our citizens mobile, making sure that the person from the Lviv Oblast would, I see the mayor of Lviv here, Mr. Sadovy, so the person from Lviv to know all parts of his own region and then visit the next neighboring region, then go to another one after that. All of that is building cultural capital and is cementing our nation, and that is part of our national interest. This is why we're going to measure this by these indicators like mobility, awareness of people, understanding, I would say, amongst others, we have that. We are working on introducing the identity index, so how people identify themselves with Ukraine, with which instruments and mechanisms. That's what I wanted to say.
So Hanna, I'm going to call you Hanna particularly for this question as opposed to Madam Minister, because I want to raise a question that's not part of your portfolio. But you mentioned when we began that you were one of 5 women in the government, 1 of 6. Keeps going up.
Sorry, yeah.
You're down to 16%, I'm sorry to tell you. Say something about happiness for women in Ukraine. What are the challenges for women in this society, and what will it take? What does this government need to do in order to advance the opportunity for women to break down barriers that are holding women back in this society?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't count that there are 6 of us, not 5, and it's probably also the part of the answer to your question. I think at some point we have to stop counting how many there are of us in the government, in the companies, in the management positions. I think it just has to be at some point a norm of life that there are women, and we don't count whether we are 5 or 6 or 12. We don't count the men, right? I don't know how many men are there in the government. I know that there are many. But I know that there are, yeah. So I think that we just have to have it as a social norm that women have a right to obtain high positions, wherever they are in the business, in the government. I think it also has to do a lot with school, and this is the place, and also maybe also kindergarten. We shall start earlier, where we have to work with the self-awareness of girls, self-consciousness of girls. You know, we have to make sure that they believe in themselves. I'll give you one example. Our girls are doing not bad in math, and a lot of them have quite good learning results in that. However, and we also have a lot of applicants to universities in IT specialties. But when you look at the girls at IT companies, you will see like maybe 15% of those are women. So I think we have to have a discussion on about why women are afraid to go to this or that sphere, and what we can do to make them, be more self-aware.
Let me thank you. I also want to bring the Deputy Prime Minister into this, which is, in my country, there's all sorts of laws and rules on the books. And then there's also reality. And whether it's in the workplace, discrimination, sexual harassment, to what extent in this society, and I take your point, you made a serious point, this is not about simply numbers and the rest, but to what extent are women and girls every day battling matters of prejudice, discrimination, where opportunity is simply not the same for girls and women that it is for boys and men? And what is a politically feasible agenda in this area? What can be done so in 5 and 10 years, in a generation, this country's made tremendous progress and become something of an example or a model to others? What's a realistic answer to that question?
Thank you for your question. I think Ukraine, from that standpoint, is a very European country. We already have quite a progress in that regard. In the day-to-day life, I do not see much of a discrimination or women doing something differently or getting not the kind of professions that the men can obtain. Speaking about my area of speciality, I think the best services, the automated services that we have are invented by women. For example, in December we are launching a project, e-toddler, where you can have 10 services when you fill out one form on the website, only one. And that project is implemented and was invented and 100% executed by a girl, while men are still thinking about about their own projects. So I think in that regard everything is quite well already in our country, and women are occupying high posts, have high professional achievement. So if you even compare infrastructure, the sector, I'm looking at one of my friends, a woman, and her goal as what they want internet across the country, and she's a woman. And neither in our team nor in the country, I don't think we have that much of a challenge. We are very European from that point of view.
Do you want equal time on this? Do you want to disagree with the Deputy Prime Minister?
I think he has his own perspective.
Okay. If being Minister of Education doesn't work for you, you have a future as a diplomat. Look, let me just say something. It's a version of what I said yesterday when I met the president. But having the opportunity to sit here and hear 4 ministers in this government, it's really quite extraordinary that people so young, so talented, and also so committed. I love the story of being in the States and seeing the history unfolding here and wanting to be a part of it, feeling an obligation to be a part of it. So again, it's hard not to be impressed by what, as a visitor, what one sees, and it's hard. And the only reaction is to you're off to a sense of you're off to a good start, and to wish you all well, both individually and collectively. So thank you very much for this. Thank you for what you're doing 7 days a week. To those sitting here, besides thanking this panel, don't move, because we're going to segue directly into the next session. So thank you very much.